Welcome back, everybody. Eric Good with the Wounded Healers. We're going to do kind of a part 2 into the Wounded Alchemist phase that we started last week with our Brave New World video and how it ties into morality and the Wounded Alchemist. Last week was more on the political division side and how that also correlates to our how our division with others correlates to our internal division. And this week we're going to be diving into a little bit more Brave New World, but this one is a little bit more, we'll say, adult. This is all about sexuality and desire. This is about how our desire has been manufactured and toyed with, and how and manipulated, and how Taoism and Aldous Huxley kind of showed us where we were headed and how to break free of that. So we're going to start with our Taoist pyramid first. Just as a refresher, if you don't know what the Taoist pyramid first is, I do recommend that you go and watch our Taoist pyramid first explained video that we put out a while back. Right now we are working our way up that verse. We are into morality. So that verse goes, when the Tao is lost, there's goodness. When goodness is lost, there's morality. When morality is lost, there's ritual. Ritual is the husk of true faith and the beginning of chaos. And right now we're on morality. So we've worked our way through chaos. We discussed ritual. We discussed a little bit of morality last week, and this week we're going to dive a little bit more into that. There's another verse in the Tao Te Ching that goes, when a country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. And that's kind of more where we're going to be spending some time today. And even though I feel like that verse does tie into a lot about what we talked about last week, this week we're looking at this more of a psychological. When a country falls into chaos, patriotism is born, more in how when we as a nation, as a people, as the world, when we are all in chaos, how this patriotism is born, how this conforming is born, and how we have been somewhat manipulated into conforming to certain things, because the Wounded Alchemist phase is all about individuation. This is where we begin the first stages of individuation, which is becoming true to yourself, right? And obviously there will always be outside influences and in those things, but this is about finding out what you are truly drawn to. So one of the ways we lose connection to the Tao, are one of the most important ways, and the first starting point in a lot of Taoist alchemical practices, is in sexuality, desire, and how society has manufactured our pleasure. So this was Aldous Huxley's warning, the pleasure dystopia, right? So this is where Aldous Huxley was. If you've read the book at the Brave New World, there's this thing called, I believe it's called the Feelies, that they do. And every day or every night, or maybe it's once a week, whatever it is, they throw these basically huge orgy sex parties. And the entire point of that is, so in Brave New World, sex is no longer for reproduction. It's purely just for pleasure and fun. Babies are produced in test tubes and basically created to fit into certain rules. And this is really what the Wounded Alchemist phase is all about. It's about learning not to conform to the role you have been given, that has been placed in front of you. It's about navigating what happens when we replace inner wisdom with external stimulation. But a key point of Taoist alchemy is not about purity. It begins with desire. See, this is our first stage, and we're already in Taoist alchemy, you're already talking about sexuality in the first stage, because Jing is what they call basically our life force energy. This is all tied into our life force. For men, this would be our semen, and basically this is about not giving that up freely without consciousness. But Jing can be leaked in many ways. Jing can be depleted in many ways. This can also be depleted in your thoughts, in your eyes, they say, and it has the potential to be both destructive and creative. Because as you know, this can cause pure chaos when you are constantly leaking Jing, constantly leaking this life force energy. You feel depleted when you're constantly thrown from one direction to the next by this constant external stimulation, and your mind wandering and fantasizing and craving and whatever it is. You're constantly thrown into chaos because you are no longer in control. This Jing is running wild within you. This is much like the Force in Star Wars. The ability to create and destroy. And how you harness this force will determine where you are headed. So the wounded alchemists must learn to discern what they desire versus what is part of programming, trauma, or cultural identity. So this is about learning not to conform. This is about learning what it is you want, who you want to be. So back to Brave New World and the pleasure dystopia. The big warning here was about sex without consciousness. The motto of their sexual encounters in Brave New World was everybody belongs to everybody. There was no relationships allowed. There was no sexual preferences allowed. Everybody belongs to everybody. And if you really think about that, you could easily, if you don't think about it and you just listen to it, I should say, you could easily find yourself siding with the everybody belongs to everybody on one side, right? You could easily see yourself going, oh, well, this is really what the LGBTQ plus community is all about, right? Well, no, because it's not about sides here. This pleasure dystopia, this everybody belongs to everybody, really ties into both sides, because if you look at the far right, then you have the whole concept of women belong to men as pretty much someone to give them babies, right? To feed them and cook and clean their house and all of those things. They belong to them. And so what we're really trying to do here is to get out of that. What we're trying to do is find what is your sexual identity. What is it truly that you crave? What do you desire? Are you being pulled towards something because of what you see, what you've been told? There's a lot of shaming going around on both sides. On the, obviously with the right and the homophobia and the, anti-LGBTQ plus, and not wanting to accept that and understand that people can be diverse and have diverse desires and diverse preferences. And on the LGBTQ plus side, I've also seen a lot of people hating on people who are straight because they can't believe that anybody would ever be that. Nobody would ever, how could they ever want to be in a straight monogamous relationship with just one person for their whole lives, right? And neither side is right. But neither side is really wrong either. It's about finding what is your identity. So this is when we begin to live in a society that has been lulled into apathy through pleasure. So what do we have now? What are, think about where we're headed. We have AI partners, soon that those will be physical beings that people can have a relationship with. I mean, for decades now, we've had internet porn, instant access to a gene depletion source whenever you want, right? We have hypersexualized social media. It's almost impossible not to scroll through social media. It doesn't matter what my social media could be all consciousness and yoga and whatever else, but there's always going to be somebody who's got to throw in a thirst trap, right? And we have polyamory becoming a trend, rather than people genuinely craving that. We have people who now think it's cool, they think it's cool to be polyamorous, and they want to do that because it's now the fun, popular thing to do. We have people who swinging has become their entire identity. Their sexual preferences have become their identities. That's not what this is about. That's not what the Wounded Alchemist phase is about. It's not about allowing desire and sexuality to become your identity. It's about taking that and becoming your own person. But all of these things now have led to shortened attention spans, declining birth rates, relationship instability. Lao Tzu said, do what others do. Or do what others do, avoid what others avoid. How ridiculous, right? Simple. That's really what this boils down to. Because the Wounded Alchemist is the first stage of individuation, as we've said, right? So this is all about balance in our inner and outer worlds, to bring us back into wholeness. Because the Tao is not about conformity and rigidness. It's about effortlessness. Effortlessness. When you're forcing yourself to be something, you feel like you're forcing yourself to be something, it's not in alignment with the Tao. Even being Taoist is not about being perfect. It's not about purity. It's not about not having desires, right? It's about acknowledging those pulls of desire, the pull of addiction, the pull of stimulation, but not being moved by it. It's about being effortless. It's about being wholly and completely present. Wu Wei. The Tao, a lot of people look at it and they think, when they think of enlightenment, they think of gurus and people meditating in the mountains and monks and people who have sworn off society. And that's not what Taoism teaches us at all. If you read Chuang-Tzu, which is another very classic Taoist text, which I also highly recommend, you realize that being Taoist, anybody can be a Taoist. There's no constraints. One of the stories in the book is about a butcher. And it's about how when he started his job, every day he was slicing the beef, right? Slicing the beef. He would have to bring up the hatchet, bring it down, and slice through the beef. Day after day after day. And finally, he didn't have to do that. He came in and the beef sliced itself. He was no longer thinking, doing, he just was. He became the butcher. He's no longer doing a job. He was just living his life. He wasn't forcing. He had just learned to be. If you ever look up, try to find, if you even just Google right now, Taoist movies to watch, you know what's going to pop up? the Big Lebowski of all movies, because dude was all about being himself at all moments, right? He never tried to be anybody but himself. And that is true morality. Not repression, but discernment. It becomes a compass that leads us back to the Tao. Because instead of falling down the ladder back into chaos, you choose to climb up the ladder that brings you strength and peace, that brings you in alignment with the Tao. When going down the ladder, we are no longer connected to ourselves, so we over-identify with the tribe, whatever tribe that may be that we choose. When a country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. When a person falls into chaos, there's overcompensation. Moralism, racial identities, performative sexuality, hardline politics, anything to avoid acknowledging how far we've fallen from the Tao. How far have you fallen? Are you living a life authentic and true to yourself? Do you love doing what you do? Or are the choices you're making, the things you're doing every day, keeping you stuck in a shame loop? Are they keeping you stuck in a constant cycle of chasing after a feeling, chasing after that high? Remember, effortlessness. This is about being you without having to overthink it. So that's what I'm going to leave you with this week. I don't know if there's going to be a part 3 to this morality phase. I think this is probably the deepest phase out of all of them. I think there's a lot of topics to touch on, but I also think that I could probably do a whole series on this alone sometime in the future. So stay tuned for next week, where most likely we will start to move on to the goodness phase and probably do 2 videos on that. We'll probably start off with one onto how morality leads into goodness, and then probably one on goodness itself, which we call the Wounded Guide phase. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment on our videos, reach out to us on Instagram, the Wounded Healer Network, no S, on our Instagram tag, or email us at thewoundedhealersnetwork@gmail.com. We'd love to connect with you guys. Please like, share, subscribe. We really appreciate the people who have been watching our videos and staying tuned to what we're doing. And last but not least, I should throw this in. If you are interested in trying out our program, we are looking for a few people to go through the program, no cost at all to you other than filling out our feedback form just to get some feedback on the program that we've, poured our hearts into, and see how it really works. We've both been working the program ourselves, multiple times just to make sure it really flows and makes sense. I believe in it, and I look forward to working with you all and hearing from you all. All right, wholeness. Have a great day.